I'm Mark. Hi, Karen.
Hey, Deborah, how are you?
I'm on time and looking forward to a terrible storm, which may knock out my internet, but hopefully not. It's black as night, even though it is nighttime here. It is dark as can be. So, hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm so glad you're both here. We might have a short group tonight because a few of the usual community had commitments tonight. So I'm
Okay.
really thrilled because Kira, it's getting recorded, so everybody who signs up, which there were about 40 people, and if you get 4, you're lucky. There are about 40 people signed up, but they'll be getting your recording. So I want to go into what it is that you were trying to say last week that I missed because I was in a hurry. And then what we do here is we talk about what brought you here. So Kira, let me start with Mark and welcome everybody to the MAAP program, Navigating the Journey Your Pet Takes When You Can't Care for It. This is a program I started many years ago, 2013, but really pushed for weekly meetings once COVID hit, because I realized that my MAAP program was great before a pandemic. However, after a pandemic, it really needed a lot of help because you couldn't get your friend from Connecticut or Maryland, since I'm in New York, to come into New York during COVID because they couldn't come into New York. So if you got sick, you couldn't get them to help you. So there's been a lot of changes that were made. And then today, before we came on, I was talking to a breed group who were trying to decide what to do with their frozen sperm, because you know, top breeders sometimes freeze their male dog sperm for use later on. And most of them die without making a plan for it. So I was talking to them about what they needed to do to make sure that whatever they did was in writing and that they checked on it all the time. Because if you leave it to your family to care for, it may be defrosted and thrown away lickety-split. And that would be a devastation to the breed. So being able to tell people what you want to do is really important. So without further ado, it is 6:30. Thank you both for being early. Mark, tell us why you're here and if you have any pets and what their names are.
Yeah, I have 3 pets. I have a dog and 2 cats. The dog's name is Minnie, and she's back here at the moment, chewing away on a chewy. And the cats are Amber and Jet. And they're 2 ragdolls. The 3 of them, they're all indoors, very happy. They get along great together. And you know, I'm a relatively, I like to think I'm a relatively young person, but obviously, as you said, it just occurred to me a few days ago that there is no product on the market for pet insurance. I mean, we've got the pets are insured and we make use of the insurance and it's brilliant, but there is no product available to provide ongoing care for my pet after I die, and I'd gladly pay. You know, I would gladly, if Pet Plan came along or any of the big insurers came along and said, yeah, this is going to cost you whatever it is, £40 or, $60 a month or whatever.
Right.
I would happily pay in that for the duration of my pet's lifetime. And then if anything happened to me, I knew they would be protected. And as part of that post that I made, just basically asking the community, which you were so kind enough to respond to, I was trying to really engage with the CEOs and the heads of marketing of the insurance companies and invite them into that conversation, because I honestly think they're missing, forget the pets, from a commercial standpoint, I think they're missing a huge opportunity, especially these days.
Absolutely. And you know, the attorneys who make your trust and estate plans miss the opportunity as well. I give talks often, and I always ask the attorneys, how many of you have put provisions in your will for the care of your pet? Maybe half of them raise their hands, and I'm being generous. But when I say how many of you made a plan for your pet if something happens to you and you're not dead yet? So if you've broken something, or if you have a stroke, or if you have Alzheimer's, right? If you don't have a plan for your pets, what happens to them? So that's why I built this, because I broke my ankle and realized I had 9 dogs and no one to care for them. So it was, one of those Yankee ingenuity times where you had to figure out what to do next time it happens, because that time I was lucky I found some people. But we're going to talk about that, because I think collaborating with people. This week I spoke to a woman named Peggy Hoyt, who's here in the United States. She's a trust and estate attorney. She also is a big rescue person as well. And she's created a pet trust program or group that helps people understand the need for it. And when I told her about my MAAP plan, she goes, wow, we have to collaborate. She goes, because I don't have the program that helps the pet owner create what they want to do. And so, you know, I was a pet owner. I'm not a trust and estate attorney. I was a pet owner with a legal background who said, okay, so what do I need to do to make sure this happens? So we're going to do that in just a minute, but I know Kieran is going to tell us about his animals. So you hear about his animals, Mark, and then he's going to talk about the program he has, because he's got a really interesting program. So go ahead, Kieran.
Yeah. Hi, Kieran.
Hi, Mark. I'll tell you, that's fascinating. I just to give you a little background about myself, I'm a financial advisor, but I qualified as an insurance broker as well. And when I hear that, I think it's a brilliant idea, and perhaps there is a gap in the market. The one question I have is there a market in that gap?
Well, you know, that's a great question, Kieran, because people don't make wills, right? So is there a gap? I think, quite frankly, that there's a gap in the market. There's a want in the market. And especially since COVID, people recognize, like Mark said, you know, I'm a young guy, I'm a healthy guy, but there are some young and healthy people who are no longer with us. So that really hit home to a lot of people. So there is a market for it. You couldn't tell by the amount of people who come to the MAAP plan every Wednesday, but the amount of people who listen to it later is incredible. Yeah. And the people who go to my website to download the forms to fill out is also incredible. So, you know, there's a do-it-yourself program, which is helpful, but you're right. There's a market there where you can finance it, where you can either get an annuity or you can do something that would create the funding to take care of your pets if something happened to you, short or long term.
I'm just asking that question, Mark, from the cultural point of view, that I could not see that taking off in Ireland or possibly the UK.
Well, what's the reason for that? Because from my point of view, I worry what's going to happen to my pets after I die.
Yeah.
And if they exceed, you know, if they die before I do, it's not a problem. But if they don't, I'm left without any recourse. I have to rely on the family, who are all great, but the family are all big pet owners as well. And not always can you have such a heavy mixed household of different pets. Yeah. So, and I hear horror stories all the time of pets, beloved animals, domesticated, friendly, put into shelter. And then they're forgotten about. And, you know, if you're following on LinkedIn, you'll see the shelter animals are basically, if they can't be placed, they're killed. And
you know, it's interesting you said that, because I don't know if you know Spencer Hoggets, but Spencer Hoggets is a rebound dog. We're going to put up a podcast. So I have a podcast called Why Do Pets Matter? And one of them will be Spencer and a group of the colleagues who are rebound dogs. So if you look up rebound dog on LinkedIn and you look it up, I think it's on Facebook as well. He did create that discussion about what happens to your dogs. That's how we got connected, because I give the program that you put together so that you can plan for what happens to your dogs. And so just so you know, Mark, it stands for something. All the letters stand for something. So sorry, Kieran, I'm going to go through it really quickly, I promise. So the M is for make a plan. The A is for address the needs of each pet, because only you know how to take care of your pets. The other A is for appoint caregivers. So you said your family has animals. Well, that's great. But maybe they can't take cats because their dog doesn't like cats, or whatever it is. Then you have to address it, and only one person who you appoint as a caregiver can be a family member. All the rest of them have to be other people who you need to trust, that will take care of your pets. And then the last letter is P, and people say, what's that for? And I go, well, it's for publishing it. Because if you write this plan up and you don't take the time to publish it, so people know, okay, so my mom is the person who's going to take my animals, but then it's going to be the neighbor who loves my animals, and then it's going to be the vet tech who also loves my animals. And if that doesn't work out, then I've befriended a rescue where I either got my animals or that I work at, or if you said you had ragdoll cats. Well, there's a ragdoll cat rescue, which evaluates ragdoll cats and only places them with ragdoll cat people who know the breed. So it is something to really research and become familiar with, because I always, if you have a purebred dog, I always say, make sure that purebred rescue in your area is the last person on the list, because they will make sure the dog or cat gets into a good home. And if it's a mixed breed, make sure you keep in touch with the rescue, though you don't want it to go back to the rescue you got it from or the shelter you got it from. You at least have provided. I know that the North Shore Animal League here in New York, if you pay them $5,000, they will take care of your cat for the rest of its life. It'll be in a room. It's not the shelter. It's not going to be a shelter dog. But it'll be in one of their suite rooms, and it lives the rest of its life. Or if they find someone who falls in love with your animal, they will let the animal go, but with the proviso that if something comes up, the cat comes back to them or the dog comes back to them. So before I lose time, because I always do this, Kieran, tell us what you were going to tell us last week, because I want to hear all about that. It was so interesting, and I was so rude, and I apologize.
Oh, you're never rude, Debbie. Never, never. Okay, I'll give a quick recap, which is I'm very much an accidental dog trainer. So by that I mean I ended up living near a rescue shelter a few years back, and as you do, you go in and you see what's happening. And I sort of absolutely fell in love with the life of the rescue shelter and everything else. So I studied to be a dog trainer, and I qualified a few years ago. But the one thing that got to me, and I suppose it gets to everybody that has any involvement with rescue shelters, is that it's like the entire system is set up to fail and fail continuously. And the two areas that really got to me were that when you win as a volunteer, there's almost zero training for you. And, you know, if you volunteer regularly and every week, they expect you sort of pick it up. And what I found now, you know, looking back after I qualified, was a huge amount of rescue shelters, and they all have a very similar history, which is they take a dog in or two dogs, and then suddenly they have a household full of dogs, and then there's volunteers called. And there's an extension built here, and there's a committee formed, and the money comes in, and it's total sort of ad hoc and chaos.
I was just going to say, and it's chaos, yes.
Yeah. And then, so that's the rescue side. Now, if you take it from the people coming in to get a dog, or the people who leave dogs at rescue shelters, there's a certain mirror image of that phenomenon, which is 50% of all dogs in rescue shelters are there simply because the owner, or the original owner, or at the point of sale or point of acquisition, the person taking up the responsibility hadn't a clue what they were getting involved in. And then, sure enough, it's only a question of time. In 1 out of 2 cases, you know, it's not if, it's when the dog gets brought to the rescue shelter. And then you look at the dogs in the rescue shelter, and 20% of those were in that rescue shelter or a different rescue shelter. And quite often, if they are resurrendered, then the possibility of them spending their days there is quite high, because they're confused, or they've taken up some.
Yeah, they're repeat offenders. It's either that they've been there and they react, or they've never been there and they react. So Mark was right. When you drop them off at the shelter, they don't even look like the same dogs who live in his home, or cats.
Yeah. So anyway, what I'm trying to do with tiny bits of success, and I think it's going to be a lifetime of work to make anything happen, is I spent some while researching, you know, is this the case only in Ireland, or is it everywhere?
Everywhere.
And no, not everywhere. There's about 3% of places in the world where it's not the same, thank God. Switzerland and Austria and some of the Scandinavian countries are the key to it. And Holland is a good example, where if you want to get a dog for the first time, you have to do a theory course. And if you don't do the theory course, quite simply from a legal perspective, you're not allowed to adopt the dog. Now, the Swiss system is the gold standard, where you have to do 4 hours and then you get your little bit of paper saying you did the course. And then you have to get the indemnity insurance and health insurance for the dog. Then you pay 1,250 euros, which I think it's, what's the euro to the dollar at the moment? Is it?
I think it's like $1.50 to a euro, right?
$1.50. So you would be talking about
Or
close
the other way.
to,
I think
close,
yeah.
you'd be talking about close to $1,800 to
Right.
get a dog license. And then when you have those bits of paper sorted out, you have to bring yourself, and you may then take custody of the dog. That's it.
Yeah.
And then you have 30 days to come back to the dog training school with the dog microchipped and a vaccination record, and a bit longer if it's just a new pup vaccinated for obvious reasons. But at this, when you go back to the school for the assessment, the people in the school have the authority to void the license if you feel you're the wrong person with the wrong dog.
Yeah.
So the situation anyway in Ireland, UK and the States is almost the exact opposite, where there's no responsibility on the individual, but every time there's a stray dog in Ireland, it costs somewhere between 500 euros and 3,000 euros, depending on a few different factors. But the point is that the taxpayer picks up the tab at the end of the day.
Yep.
You know, so it's exactly the opposite. What I've been trying to do anyways is bring in a sort of a certificate educational system where, on an opt-in basis, where somebody can do a very simple course. It only takes about an hour to do the course, an hour and a half to do the course and the certification exam, just 15 multiple choice questions. And the whole idea behind it is I'm trying to get the rescue shelters to ask people to do it before they adopt.
Right. When they're looking for the dog, before they walk through the alleys and the aisles,
Yeah.
take this test, and then we'll let you know how you tested and what kind of dog you can look for. Because if you take a 15-question test, then you'll know that you'd like a smaller dog, than a bigger dog, you'd like an older dog, than a young dog. So that's brilliant. That's really brilliant, Kieran.
So that's where it is. Now we've just on the first part of that equation with the rescue shelters, we've teamed up with a Canadian company, which is primarily a veterinary and dog behaviorist outfit. And they have a very good course for the essentials for rescue shelter staff and volunteers.
Yeah.
So I'm offering that at the moment to any rescue shelters interested in it. But
what, in Ireland or anywhere? Because it's
anywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere. Well, the rescue shelter staff, the essentials for shelter staff and volunteers, that's owned by the Canadians. So I'm just trying to get it moving in Ireland and the UK.
Yeah.
But I'll send you their details. It's it takes a lot of work, that course. Mine is a lot simpler.
Yeah, it does. But it's really interesting. I've gone to a number of shelters in my practice and attempted to help them overcome conflicts that arise between volunteers, administrative staff, and the veterinarians, because they're all having their own perspective and perception. And then, of course, mine's different than yours, and yours is different than Mark's, and Mark's is different from Rose's. And so, here we are. So it's an amazing program that absolutely should get off the ground. Anything I can do to help, we'll talk about it, because for me, it's part of the MAAP plan. So if you want to make a plan for your pet, you have to want to invest in that pet. And as Mark said, these animals are my animals. I want to make sure that they're cared for. And my argument, Mark, is, so you're young, I'm old, but I don't want to give up having dogs or cats, right? I certainly don't want to give up getting dogs and cats because I might not outlive them. And
Yeah,
I
well,
think
funnily
that,
enough, that's if I may, that's an attitude that's quite common, that people sort of count back from the expected death date of the animal and say, well, I'm not going to have one
yep,
because it's not fair to it. Whereas I tend to think of it a different way. Firstly, you've got the companionship of having the animal and something else to care for that you can put your mind on rather than
get you up
yourself. Is
out of
really,
bed.
yeah, exactly. And the other thing that I think is very important is that for X number of years, it might not be the full lifespan of that animal, but you can give it a brilliant home.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why the animal should be denied that.
Nope.
Now,
And
and
you,
I'm really interested in Kieran's thinking that there isn't a market for pet owners like myself who want to secure the future of their animals.
yeah.
I'd be really interested to hear from your audience as to whether or not am I an outlier? You know, am I just thinking of this in an unusual way, or is this a pervasive attitude that's becoming more normalized as we talk about it?
I think in the last 30 years, so maybe from the 70s or 80s until now, people have become more attached to their animals as companion animals and not just as farm animals or just outdoor dogs. So they're different now. Outdoor cats, they're different now. People have them in their home. Some people have them instead of children. So they're much more important. It has not yet gotten into the lexicon of trust and estate attorneys here in the United States, and I find it the same in England, because I love trust and estate attorneys, and I'm not playing one, and I don't play one on TV. I love trust and estate attorneys, but they are the driest group of people in the entire universe. And they are looking at actuarial tables, so that's probably why. And they don't get it. They don't get that Mark wants to make sure his dog and cats are planned for in his estate planning. And they don't get it that he wants to make sure that if, God forbid, something happens to him long-term, short-term, i.e. like me, you break your ankle, right? How do you walk your dog? Or I have to tell you that the MAAP plan came into help me when my husband broke his shoulder, because I don't know if both of you are married or not, or if you have parents or children or whatever, but if one of them gets sick, having the MAAP plan in place to take care of your pet while you're caring for them was a godsend for me, because my husband broke his shoulder, and I was like, you need to come over once a day, take them for a long walk, because I can't leave him, or else stay with him, but at least they were in the house, right? So I don't think you're an outlier. I do think, that when I speak to trust and estate attorneys, they aren't, except for Peggy Hoyt, they aren't really tuned into this. And she commented that to me yesterday when I spoke to her, and I'm going to have her on my Why Do Pets Matter podcast, so you can listen for different ideas on the Why Do Pets Matter podcast. But she said that really attorneys don't get how much people would spend to make sure their pets were cared for. And I don't know how both of you, how much you follow rescue, either horses or dogs, but it always pains me. And you put it beautifully, Kieran, you know, the rescues in the UK, in the United States, let the dogs out to people who pay a nominal fee, and they never check up on the dogs. They make them sign this horrendous contract that, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that. And if you do this, I can come and take the dog and blah, blah. But they never check up on the dog. They never facilitate, like you said, Kieran, I would love to facilitate, okay, you're taking a puppy home, it's, you know, 8 weeks old, whatever. So in 16 weeks, we are having a class. You're going to be required to come to that class, or you'll have to pay us $200. So it'll be free.
Though, Deborah, may I ask though, isn't this though indicative that the insurance company, who is that they're the net for the money, they are the ones who rake that money in and they apply it to all of their to their customer base. They are the ones who have the resources behind them to be able to employ the kind of lawyers you're talking about. And in truth, it doesn't need to convince the lawyers it's a good idea. I wonder if that's the wrong angle. You need to convince the insurers that there's a market there. Now, and again, I'm sorry, I know I'm like, if I can use the analogy, I am like a dog with a bone about this. I'm sorry.
No, and you should be. Listen, I've been doing the MAP plan since 2013, and if I've created 1,000, that's not that many, since 2013 for people to care for their pets. This should be, everyone who has a pet should make a plan.
Well, how can we get the insurers into this conversation? I mean, Kieran, you feel that there isn't a market in Ireland. Are we saying that nobody in Ireland would consider a posthumous protection policy for their pets?
I'll put it this way, Mark. I never heard that type of thinking before this conversation.
And I can
Yeah.
tell you, Mark, that most of the time, especially when I speak to people in Ireland or in England or some in the United States, it's so I will say that the people who show up on this call want to make a plan for their pets, right? So we are a niche, right?
Yeah.
But when I go and talk to, you would think, so when I go to talk to breed clubs, I have 80 people in the room. I create a program where they make this plan for their pets. And the only thing they need to do is they need to send me the finished copy, and I'll refund them half of the money they spent to be part of the group. Ask me how many I've gotten.
Go.
None. And they have like 25 dogs. It's not like they have 2 cats and a dog. They have like 25 dogs.
What do you think the reason is for that then?
Well, you know, here in the United States, I can't speak anywhere else, but I'm pretty sure it's the same. So in the dog breeding world, right, the show world, the people who show their dogs, we come to the aid of our countrymen. So we have had people, I raise Irish setters. That's why Kieran loves me. So I raise Irish setters. And so in the Irish setter world, we've had 3 or 4 of our really long time, wonderful breeders come down with Alzheimer's. And we just waited. We waited, and we asked them to make a plan. I spoke to them 3 or 4 times. Let's make a plan. Let's figure out where you want your 4 dogs to go, while they still were able to make a plan, right?
Yeah.
Because they were just diagnosed, and we could make a plan, and it would stand up in court. I'll do it tomorrow. I don't want to do it right now. I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah, I think though in that particular example, you're talking about a degree of cognitive impairment that, although they may be quite shallow on the scale, it does affect things. And I've had first-hand experience of this as well, and I know you have. It does affect judgment, because I think there's also a case of, if I make this plan, I'm definitely going to die.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that is the reason people don't make the plan. And they just figure that, you know, Mark and Kieran are breeders with me, and they're going to come and take care of my dogs. And I say to them, okay, so who in the breed world would be the last person you would want to take one of your dogs? Well, it would be Rose. I'd hate Rose to get one of my dogs. Well, guess who's coming to get your dogs? Because she lives a mile away. Rose is coming to get your dogs. And I sit there and go, if you truly don't want Rose to get your dogs, then you better make a plan, and you better set it out. And like I said at the beginning of this discussion, tonight we had a huge discussion on a Facebook page for Irish setter breeders who were talking about, what do you do with your frozen sperm from your big winning dogs, right? None of them talked about making a plan. They talked about, you know, telling their family to give it to this person or that person. And I said, is any of this in writing? Because if it isn't in writing, it's never going to happen. So for you, Mark, when you're making your plan for if you go on my website, if you do MAAP or Hamilton Law Mediation and then do /MAAP plan, I think there's something in there. Rose will probably put it up. But you'll see that there are pieces that you have to execute. There are people you have to set up, and then you have to tell them. So you have to tell Mark, you're the first person I'm putting on my list to take my cats. Rose, you're the first person on my list to take the dogs. And Deborah, you're the person who I'm going to entrust the sperm to either give it to this one or that one or let it go. Because I can tell you, here in the United States, there have been people who have died with a whole shit ton, excuse the expression, of phenomenal, long time, you know, old style Irish setter dog sperm, and they go in and pay the bill and they get it. Because if they show a death certificate, they just have to pay the bill, and it's cheap because it's usually like, you know, $1,000, but they can sell every one of those straws for $1,000.
You're talking about a system that you've created to fill in a gap, a failing in the existing system.
Yep.
And I think that's very laudable. I think that's brilliant. What I'm talking about is a systemic change within the insurance industry to take all of that, because that's quite, I mean, you've done brilliantly, because it's quite a complex field. You're having to pull together the legal, all of the different aspects you're having to pull together. Most people don't have your skill. with that. And I understand that the program is designed to help them, but even for various other reasons, if they're frightened of admitting that one day they're going to die, then they may just ignore making the plan. Whereas what I'm thinking of is this could be a natural extension to the product that is sold already in pet insurance.
The insurance.
And
Yep.
I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm sorry.
No.
I would very much like to understand what can be done to engage with the companies who at the moment, let's look at who can stand to gain the most from having this as a product that's available.
Well, the annuity companies, the annuity providers, because you'll pay into an insurance annuity that will come into fruition if you die. And then there are insurance policies, term insurance policies that you can buy for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, whatever. And I've had, and I think if you look back on some of the MAAP discussions, if not these for COVID, but the ones before, I talked to 3 financial planners who do this kind of insurance work. It's not an insurance company. I'm not sure if the veterinarian provided insurance companies, although I know of several of them. So I'm going to go look into this, Mark, and come back, and I will have an answer for you next week. If in fact the ones who now provide the insurance for care would provide insurance for long-term care, not veterinary, but provide some sort of an annuity that you could purchase and pay every month, so that if something happens to you, the person gets $1,000, $10,000, whatever.
Yeah.
I always say when the MAP plan is there, I always say, please do not leave a lot of money in the MAP plan. And if you're older, like me, you want to leave it irrevocable in a pet trust. So here in the United States, all 50 states have a pet trust. I'm not sure they have that in the UK, but they might. You'll have to ask an attorney, and I'll ask a few of my attorney friends over in England if they have a pet trust. But you make a pet trust, and you put money in the pet trust that's supposed to be for the pet trust. And if you're older, and over here we have Medicare, right? So if in fact something happens to you and it's a revocable trust, which means, okay, when I'm 80, I don't have a dog anymore, I can pull that money back into my estate and use it because there's no more dogs.
Yeah.
Well, if you're 80 and something happens to you and you need care, if you've not made that trust irrevocable, that money will be taken out of the trust for your care, and your pets won't get it. So it's something you really need to make a plan about.
Absolutely. And that's one of the gotchas that you're aware of, but most people aren't.
No.
And that is why I think it's an absolute perfect fit for a company like, and I keep using the example, Pet Plan, or I mean, there's many others, Dogs Trust, Blue Cross, whatever. There's various other service providers, and it seems to me.
You're talking of the service providers who help you pay the vet bill.
Yeah, those are the same guys. So at the moment, I pay into an insurance policy with Pet Plan. And it's a lifetime policy for my dog, and I chose that policy when we got Minnie, and as a little pup, obviously she's got a whole life ahead of her. Right. But at the time, my wife and I, we both believe very strongly in pet insurance. Now I know it works slightly differently in the US. I have been told that. I don't know the specifics, but certainly in the UK, and it may be the same in Ireland, Kieran. So if it is, you'll have heard all this. You choose your policy when the pet's very young. They will set a figure. Usually the figure is consistent, and there's an excess to pay in the event of a claim. And because of the excess being usually something like £80 or £100 or whatever, it dissuades unnecessary claiming. But if you have a serious condition, because an X-ray, a CT scan, all that sort of stuff is thousands. So that's where the insurance starts paying off. Now, had I had the option when Minnie was a pup, I wouldn't have just gone for the lifetime. I would have gone for the posthumous side of it, so that I can make sure she is cared for, so that throughout the life of my dog, I'm paying in every month to that insurance, and I would expect the insurance provider, Pet Plan, to have its own network of legal people, just like they do now when they fight a claim. So legal people, that they have a network of foster carers, people who also regulate the service, and that they actually are regulated also by government, so that they fall within the standards that I expect from somebody, I'm going to say, look after my that they are my most precious belongings. And what I'd very much like to do, Deborah, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to take over your podcast.
No, you're not at all.
But what I'd very much like to do is I'd like to hear on the article, which the link for which I cannot remember. I think you've got a link to it, but I'll send it to you. But on the article and the conversation where I've invited the CEOs of Pet Plan, Blue Cross, Dogs Trust, Cats Defence League, all of these guys, and if there's anybody I've missed, I'm happy to invite them in as well.
Mm-hmm.
But if we actually build up a pool of people who can say, yeah, I'd buy that, it would at least demonstrate from a business standpoint to the insurance providers that there is actually an opportunity there that's worthy of them taking a look at. And I think they'll know far more about it than I will.
You know, Mark, send me the link again so that we can redo it, because I'm thinking I have several colleagues who provide pet insurance. And here in the United States, you can buy wellness insurance, or you can buy catastrophic insurance, or you can buy both like me, because I'm crazy. So the wellness insurance covers your, well checks, right? So vaccinations, heartworm, things like that. It does all the regular stuff. And then the catastrophic, if something happens, like you said, there's a $200 or $300 deductible, but the rest is covered. Maybe there's even $1,000 deductible, but we're talking cancer care, we're talking splenectomies, we're talking
all the expensive stuff.
All the expensive stuff. And I do know that they actuate it out for the intended life of the dog. So say for Irish setters, they probably actuate out to 12 years of age, because they may live longer, but they likely will not. But for a Chihuahua, they probably actuate out for 20 years, because those things can live forever.
Sure.
So I think you're really onto something, and having the MAAP plan in place, because for me, the other question that you may have thought of, and I just didn't hear you speak about it, is the insurance plan transferable to that person who is taking your dog at the end of the day? So if you're paying the payments and you've set up to pay the payments, whether you're dead or alive, out of your estate, or if you're incapacitated, your attorney or your trust will make sure all those payments are made. If in fact you can transfer that from you, the owner, to Kieran, the first appointed caregiver. And if Kieran...
Well, I was thinking of it slightly differently, because I've got quite a commercial background. I was thinking that of the money paid into the scheme over the lifetime of the animal, if the animal then needs rehoming, the people who do the fostering can be paid to give the animal out of that policy the care that's required.
Well, you always have to be careful about that, because it'll either be the shortest lived dog, if there's not a lot of money coming in, or the longest lived cat in the entire universe.
Well, I mean, you want to go for the longest, most comfortable option possible. And
no. I mean that facetiously, in that they buy another black cat.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry. Yeah. Well, obviously the cat is, the cat, the dog, or whatever is chipped, but this is where the regulation comes in. This is where the trusted network comes in.
And of course, I think that for most people, this insurance scheme would work really well. And I don't mean scheme in a negative way. I mean scheme in a
I understand.
way.
Yeah.
And being able to write a plan that says that, okay, so if something happens to me, I want Kieran to be the first person. If Kieran can't take it, I want Deborah to be the second person. If Deborah can't take it, Rose. And if Rose can't take it, then I'd like it to be given to the foster group affiliated with this insurance policy. Because for me, I always liked, and I have to tell you, when I go to you guys have the independent living facilities, right, where people are allowed to have 20-pound dogs, and they never check whether or not there's a plan for that 20-pound dog if those older people ever have an issue. So here we have the Atria, we have the Briars. There are a bunch of places where older people live independently. They have their meals cooked for them, but they live independently. And they all have dogs, 20-pound dogs. And nobody ever checks. And I go speak to this group all the time, and they go, well, they have it in their cards that in fact, they're family. And if you talk to them when I hold these programs, they go, my son doesn't want my dog. He's told me he doesn't want my dog. But that's the person on the card who's supposed to get the dog, which will immediately go to the shelter. And if it's an older dog, it'll be put to sleep.
That's why, and these people do not have the network available to be able to nominate the degree of first choice, second choice, third choice. But
and so they need to know, okay, so when I do my program, I usually say to them, so you walk the dog, and most of them do. I said, do you have a dog walker? Some of them do. I said, so So the first person who should take your dog would be the dog walker, unless the dog walker doesn't want your dog. And if the dog walker doesn't want your dog, well, then the dog walker might know someone on the, the walk, if he takes it for you, that loves your dog, that says hello to your dog. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but since COVID hit, I'm walking my dog around the neighborhood all the time. And there are at least 3 people who want to take my dog from me and keep it. So you meet people. And those are the people who could possibly be that person. Now, it's not a perfect world, but at least you know who's getting the dog. It's not, sort of a crapshoot. And to screen this, governments really don't. I mean, look at the shelters. Look what Karen said about the shelters. There's no training for the volunteers. There's very little training for the employees. And so for us to ask them to train fosters, it's like holy Toledo.
Well, I think
but
the
it's a great
shelters are the
plan,
wrong.
and I don't think
The shelters are the wrong focus.
Yeah.
The shelters do not have the infrastructure behind them as corporations who understand how to actually create an engine of wealth behind this service. The service at the moment is, I mean, at the present time, insurance service is very well defined. We pay for X amount of treatment based on the policy you have. I don't think it is beyond the wit of man for the CEOs of these industries, these various different companies. And if I was in their position, I would be doing this. I would be saying to my team, this is a potential gap in the market. I want you to run the numbers, figure out what it would cost.
You're making me think too much, Mark. So I'm so happy for you to be here, because what I'm thinking of, and Kieran, you're probably thinking of this too. So there are a lot of big corporations, Nike being one of them, Amazon being one of them, a lot of the, whatever that place in California is called, Silicon Valley, who provide pet insurance as part of the package for your insurance plan. If you check the box, you get pet insurance as part of your plan. It's money deducted out of your paycheck at a discount, because like you said, you have 100 people paying into this account. So it's much less. They cut a deal with the insurance company so that.
Well, I think when you're $1 trillion valued company, it's not really that much of a big deal. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. But at least they're providing that, and that's an incentive for a lot of people to take a job. I mean, I know 3 people who went to an independent place that didn't pay as well as the other place because they had pet insurance.
Yeah,
they had group pet insurance, which was much less expensive.
But, it used to be dental plans,
right?
So but now it's pet insurance.
Now it's pet insurance. So I think you're onto something. So let me do this. I hope you join us again. I'm going to call my friends in Nationwide to see if, in fact, this MAAP plan can facilitate the discussion around, if you make one of these plans, how are you going to fund it? And how are you going to man it, and see if they are willing to create that program? What do you think, Kieran? That sounds like something that might actually interest a Nationwide, or I guess maybe, I hate to say it, a Mars or something, although, Mars may or may not be one who thinks they should do that. Mars, the company that owns every single vet hospital in the universe. Then every vet something.
Are they connected with chocolate as well?
I guess they are.
I think that is.
Yes,
I think that
they are.
They are. It's
they are.
There's a line that's trotted out all the time, Mark. With innovations, and when Henry Ford was asked, if he thought people would ever, or if the car would ever become popular, he said, for God's sake, don't ask people what they need. They'll just tell you they need faster horses.
Yeah.
So quite often, the biggest problem is actually coming up with the prototype and the example.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And making it dummy proof that anybody can use, and I absolutely take your point with the rescue shelters being the wrong place. That
they're the last resort. They have their place, and it's better than leaving them out on the street. So it's better to
I tend to, and you have to excuse me because I don't know very much about how they work. I just know the horror stories I read about them. And it seems to me, especially in the States, that they're actually incentivized not to place the animals. It's the other way around. They're actually paid to kill. Which is not the way, especially in California, which is not the way it should be. So the incentivizing is it's all ass backwards. It really is.
It is.
Whereas what I'm wondering is whether or not the shelters can in some way be, I don't know what the word is, formalized, supported, taken under the wing of the companies who currently know how to grow, how to scale. And taking the MAAP scheme and the scheme that you've described, how can that be fleshed out into a program that volunteers, obviously, on the one hand, but also, you know, paid operators, paid skilled operators.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking now of, you know, COVID and pandemic, and everybody's at home, including myself, and you're there, you're present. You have the time to be able to devote to an animal. It's not like it's on its own. I wonder how many people, especially those who are suffering redundancy right now, would actually jump at the chance of being able to foster and give a great home to these animals, provided that the needs were cared for financially.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that, because here in the United States, which I'm sure it happened everywhere, I mean, there are hardly any animals in shelters because people went and adopted them in March and April.
I heard, yeah.
To fill the gap. And of
Mhm.
course, as a shelter would do, and Kieran, you know, they said, well, what's going to happen when they all go back to work? They're going to drop the dogs off again. And I said, well, if you did what Kieran said, if you educated them on how to responsibly train the dog and own the dog, and also find, like you said, Kieran, Mark, people are sitting home. They want a job. Find someone who can walk your dog if you have to go back into the city. Don't get rid of the dog. There's ways, but we have to connect all these pieces. And that's the thing that I'm glad you're both on here, because we're starting to connect pieces.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you a true story. When we first got Minnie and brought her home, she's a cockapoo, so high energy, bouncing all over the place. We had no idea, no clue. I mean, I'd had a dog before. My wife said, well, you must know what you're doing because you've had a dog before. Well, that was when I was 7. Yeah. So
and your memory was very fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So we very nearly returned Minnie, very nearly. And in desperation, and we didn't understand her. We're both dog lovers, but we didn't understand the behavior. In desperation, we went to a course. It was only a short one. It was a day, about 6 hours, socialization course. And it was gold dust. And if your courses are anything like that, Kieran, it basically told us how to read and understand our dog and how to communicate. And just a silly thing, when Minnie got hungry as a puppy, she would run around as if she wanted to play, but then because she was a pup, she'd bite your hands. Not hard, but she would chew your fingers, and we didn't understand that. She was hungry.
Yeah.
That's all it was. And once we understood, you can take care of the needs, and it doesn't take much. And each breed is obviously different and unique. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think that what you're presenting, Kieran, is very valuable. And Deborah, you're looking at it from the legal standpoint, which I think is superb. And what we're looking at is we now need the financial and the structural system around that to formalize it and make it accountable.
Because wouldn't it be great if you could put the money away so that when you got a dog, you could pay for the course you took or pay for a longer course that Kieran's created, so that you could have a responsible ownership that would mimic Switzerland and Austria, so that you would know what you were getting into. And you would put money down. I always like the refund method where, okay, it's going to cost you $2,000 to buy this dog, but you'll get $500 back if you complete this course. Because it's only going to make the relationship with the animal better. And if you sign up for insurance for this pet, for its health, and then insurance to make sure that if something happens to you, it's cared for, then you get another $250 back. I know when I sell puppies, I do that. I refund for certain milestones you meet. I refund money, and if you don't meet them, you don't get a refund. Well, most of the people meet the milestones. So I think this is a great concept.
Well, fingers crossed it has traction in the marketplace. And I'm delighted to speak to both of you. And if we can actually put a body of evidence together to prove that there is a market there and that there is some money to be made, because that's obviously the thing that's going to attract the insurance people, then hopefully we can take that to them.
Well, I'm
and
going to bring
I'll
it to
do what I
my
can to
people at
help.
Nationwide. I'm so glad you and Kieran were here for the MAP plan. Rose, thanks so much for coming as always. And for everyone who's listening to this later, this is such a unique and interesting conversation. Please don't hesitate to write me if you have ideas or connections. And I hope Mark and Kieran, you'll come back and join us another Wednesday. We're here every Wednesday at 6:30, and I know it's late in the UK and in Ireland, but we're so grateful. I know we're so grateful you're
Yeah.
here. So I'm going to let you guys
I'll
go
try
to
and
sleep.
join you again, definitely.
Right. And keep in touch. You have my email.
Sure.
So keep in
Yeah,
touch.
and
Sorry,
you have mine
Mark.
as well. We're connected. Yeah.
Mark, could I have your contact email if that's possible?
Yeah, Deborah, can you send me Kieran's details after the call, and
I
I'll
absolutely
ping him.
will.
Yeah,
Brilliant, brilliant. And it'd be good to catch up in the next few days, Mark.
absolutely. Yeah,
Absolutely. I'll do that.
That's
take care, guys.
fantastic.
It's been absolutely an honor talking to you both. Thank you very much.
Thank
Lovely
you.
stuff. Thanks, Debbie.
All right.
See you
Take
soon, Mark.
care, everyone. And thank you
Bye-bye.
for coming to the MAP program. Take care.
Thank